Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. We are on episode 13, lucky number 13. It's been a heck of a week. Last couple of weeks here in Washington State. Life is not considerably better, but we're still going to get movies next year, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, as always, if you're watching this on YouTube, congratulations again. You found us. Like this video, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies if you think it's terrible. So we can get more people watching this stuff. We're on Facebook at www.facebook.com/truthinfilm, on Twitter at Sunday_matinee. And tonight I have on the panel, returning for the first time since Halloween, Andrea Gordon is back with us tonight.
Hello.
And for the first time after 12 episodes, joining us is the person who obviously has the best setup of us all, Gary Chambers.
Hey, everybody.
So now that you know who all is here tonight, we're going to jump into the news. And oh boy, do I have a lot to say about our first news topic tonight, and already have said a lot about it. So this last week, Warner Brothers announced that its entire 2021 lineup is going to release in the United States on HBO Max alongside their cinematic releases. Now, you might think, okay, that doesn't seem like too much. I have the entire list of films here, and some of them are quite a doozy. And this actually kicks off on Christmas Day with Wonder Woman. But then we jump into next year, and we have on January 29th, The Little Things. On March 5th, Tom and Jerry. On March 12th, The Many Saints of Newark. April 16th, Reminiscence. May 21st, things really start rolling with Godzilla vs. Kong. On June 4th, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. June 18th, In the Heights. July 16th, Space Jam: A New Legacy. August 6th, The Suicide Squad. October 1st, finally, Dune. November 19th, King Richard. December 22nd, The Matrix 4, which I'm sure will have a much cooler title by then. And TBD, my favorite date of all, Cry Macho, Malignant, Those Who Wish Me Dead, Mortal Kombat, and Judas and the Black Messiah. Woo! That is one heck of a lineup. Especially if you factor in like Dune, Suicide Squad, Godzilla, and Matrix, which I'm sure Warner Brothers was hoping would be making quite a lot of money in ticket sales. So I'll try and keep this rant short. I do think this is a good thing, short term, while we're still in lockdown. But I get a little bit nervous and frustrated when I see people on Twitter say that this is how it just should be for all time going forward, or how it should have been, for the last several years. And I completely disagree, because one, of course, I love the cinema experience, but two, there's just no way that an HBO subscription or a Disney Plus subscription or any of these subscriptions are going to cover the enormous cost of producing these films, particularly those ones like Matrix and Dune. All those big ones. Those subscription service costs pretty much cover maintenance to keep that subscription service running, and whatever programming is, being produced specifically for that subscription service, which in HBO's case would be His Dark Materials, which has already got to be costing quite a bit for them. So, Gary, do you see this as a sign of things to come?
I do and I don't. I think it's relevant for the COVID era. We have some huge tentpole films here that have already been pre-budgeted. So any loss that Warner Brothers is going to take is already baked into the product that they're already putting out there. Most of these pictures, if not already in the can, they're well in post-production. And a lot of them are big tentpole films. But if you don't have a place to show them, whether it's COVID or some other mitigating circumstance, the market changes. This is the industry doing what the industry has to. They are pivoting in order to get these pictures out and exhibited one way or another. And is it permanent? No, I don't think so. And I think you had already pegged it, Ben, and that's because moviegoers want the movie-going experience. This whole process could light a fire under the industry and make movie presentations more unique to the venue as opposed to the 55 or 65-inch screens that we have at home, which represent a lot of the audio and video spectacle that you can have in a movie theater, bringing that home. But if you can, by virtue of having this process, have the audience recognize that the movie theater going experience, being in that auditorium, has a unique aspect to it, and you can sell that moving forward, people will be relieved to get back into the theaters again.
Yeah, I think the three of us can all agree that there was something absolutely special last year when Cap grabbed Mjolnir at the end of Endgame, and those reaction videos that are still running rampant on YouTube are absolute proof that there's something very special about being in an auditorium with you know potentially hundreds of people experiencing something incredible. Andrea,
All of
what do you
them
think about
watching
that?
Meow Meow
Oh,
being picked up by Cap.
meow meow.
Um, for me, I think it's just, I mean, piggybacking off of what Gary said, and I don't have a drink like you guys do. I should have got one. Um, but it's just kind of accessibility is the issue because I don't have HBO Max, so I won't be able to see all of these movies I want to see. I really want to see Wonder Woman, but I can't. I want to see Dune, but I can't. I want to see the Suicide Squad, but I can't unless all of this changes. And I know it's not just me, but again, it's my personal experience. A lot of people don't have HBO Max, and it's just another subscription service that people have to pay for. And especially right now, we can only pay for so many things. Like, I mean, I have Disney Plus and Netflix, and that's all I'm paying for, and that's still like a lot. But to add another subscription service is just, it's something that's kind of, in my mind, it's unfair. And I get why they're doing it because it's like, well, you have to get the service to watch these movies. And it's like, well, I can't, and I don't want to get the service just to watch those movies. And whereas going to the cinema, everybody has access to it. I mean, tickets are like $20 a ticket nowadays, but the point is $20 for one show versus $20 a month for movies you're not going to watch is just a better experience in the end. Plus, again, what Gary said, going off the experience of going to the movies itself, it's just a lot better. And I still, I mean, I have a little bit of anger in my voice because it really made me mad when I heard about it. But it's just, I don't like paying for this sort of thing. And I do again off of what Gary said. I don't think this is going to be the future. I just think it's gonna happen for right now, and then when COVID is over, yes, when we can get back to normal. Even though I know it's going to take a while to get back to normal, but I feel like a lot of different movie companies are going to be doing the same thing. Warner Brothers, obviously Disney's doing it. Probably DreamWorks is going to be doing it soon. Universal has Peacock, but they also have other things like some of their shows are on Hulu and Netflix and stuff, so that's not a big issue. But it's just it's hurting. Well, it's hurting consumers more than it's hurting the big huge companies. They're making it work, but again, it's just kind of it sucks for people like me who just can't afford yet another streaming service to see a movie that they have been waiting a really long time to see.
And the timing is wrong.
Yeah,
You figure that with COVID being what it is and a lot of people that are out of work, the logic behind cutting the cable cord couldn't be any more profound today. But yet, in the same breath, these megalopolies are asking consumers to drop X number of dollars per month. In other words, expanding what they're spending rather than pull back in order to watch the films that they would have gone into the theater a year ago for that same experience.
I like what you both are talking about regarding accessibility because yeah, it is. It's another subscription service. I've got a few of them, and I wholeheartedly admit I don't use my Netflix service that much for anything anymore. Um, I'm kind of fallen off of in being interested in their original content. Disney Plus is great to have because it, of course, allows access to all the classic Disney stuff, and of course, The Mandalorian, which is just the most fun I'm having watching anything on television right now. Um, I've brought this up before. I'm very fortunate in that I'm getting a 2-week free subscription to HBO Max, and I'm going to wait until the 25th to boot it up so that I can just watch Wonder Woman. But after that, it's like, oh man, do I hold on to it, or do I cut it off and then boot it back up in what I say was May, because there's no way I'm gonna miss Godzilla versus Kong. Um, it's very frustrating because obviously, if I had an interest in watching the stuff that's already on HBO Max enough, I would have it. I will admit, I somehow haven't watched Westworld yet, and that looks fascinating to me. His Dark Materials looks great. They've got a lot of great content, but it's not enough to drag me into it quite yet. I do think, though, that we're going to see this from other studios, like Andrea, like you said. I think Disney's going to be the first to do that because, one, they have a big investors meeting on the 10th, so just a few days from now. So I'm sure that's going to be a big thing they say. I'm betting Black Widow and whatever they have in store for Marvel next year is going to be relegated to Disney Plus. Yeah, whatever else they have on their docket coming up. I have that Ryan Reynolds video game one that looked really cute. I'm sure that'll end up there. The good news on the HBO Max side is, at the very least, they're not doing the premium charge per film like Disney did with Mulan. Mm-hmm. So that at least is a good thing. But on the flip side, these movies aren't just going to be available on HBO Max permanently. They're going to be like, that schedule is there for a reason. They're going to be there for a few weeks and then they're going away. And this also is right now, HBO Max is not available outside the US and probably, I'm sure it's in Canada, but it's not available like in Europe, which has got to be a huge market. But they're also getting a lot more films in theaters because they're smarter than us. I lost my train of thought.
Woo-hoo.
Dang.
Left the station. Woo-hoo. You're welcome.
You talked about Peacock earlier, Andrea, and yeah, Universal can shove all their stuff onto Peacock, but who watching this show right now has even heard of Peacock? I'm sorry, they have not publicized it very well at all.
Look at all of the services that are available, and if you want to get all of the content when it becomes available without having to watch over-the-air television, Peacock, CBS All Access, Hulu, Prime, Netflix, Disney Plus, the list continues to get longer and longer. At some point, you have to say, hey, enough is enough, and you either have to be patient and wait for those products to land on the subscription service you already have, or you do without. Those are pretty much the options.
Yep. It's also just it's a shame that they decided to do this well after Tenet was released, because oh boy, the saga of Tenet on this show. I've talked so much about that movie.
And that gets released to home video later this month, does it not?
It does. Today is December. We are recording now on December 6th. It releases on home video in 9 days. I have my Steelbook 4K Blu-ray pre-ordered from Best Buy. So I will finally get to watch it on a screen that will not be weird. And maybe even give it a proper review. Who knows? But yeah,
the thing is, you've retired the 12-inch black and white. You're doing Tenet on something a little bit more.
Ha.
Oh, okay.
No, I saw it at a drive-in, and I had a not so great experience. Part of which was my own fault. But I digress. So yeah, that's that. We're going to be hearing so much more about what's going on with HBO and these wonderful 2021 films that we're not going to get to see on the screens we want to. And I'm going to stop ranting about it. I'm sure that when I have Dea and Sarah on the show again, my two regulars, we will have a lot to say between the three of us about that. Um, in other news, speaking of Disney Plus, I think this is really cool. So Haley Steinfeld, Florence Pugh, and Vera Farmiga have joined the cast of Hawkeye, which has started filming. Um, it was not a big surprise that Haley Steinfeld has been cast in the show. It's been rumored for a long time. She'll be playing Kate Bishop, who will be taking over the role of Hawkeye once Jeremy Renner retires. But to hear that Florence Pugh has joined the show is awesome. That means that her character from Black Widow is going to be going places after that movie is done, which is great to know we have a Black Widow in this MCU without Scarlett Johansson. So, is anyone excited for Hawkeye?
I found out that Hawkeye exists.
For a while, Hawkeye was my guy. He was my man because I like Jeremy Renner a lot. But I wish he got his own movie rather than a TV show. But I don't know. He's such a minor character that I don't know how they do it. So I guess it's a good step for his character. I just really wish that Black Widow was about Budapest because I think it was rumored that it was supposed to be about Budapest and then they changed it. But again, I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know what it's about. But it's not about Budapest.
I have very different memories about Budapest.
Yeah.
All I know is it takes place in between Civil War and Infinity War.
Yeah, and Budapest was way before that.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I would have loved to see a Hawkeye film. In the years immediately following the Avengers, I really liked Hawkeye because Jeremy Renner was the only actor outside of the rest of the cast who was actually doing like other interesting films. Everyone else was just making more Marvel. Jeremy Renner was doing he was doing American Hustle. Oh gosh,
Mission Impossible.
Yeah, he was supposed to take over Tom Cruise from Mission Impossible, and that didn't happen. He just cannot catch a break.
I don't know what you're talking about. Dr. Dolittle is a fine motion picture. Thank you very much.
I'm sure it is, Gary. I'm going to take your word for it.
The best part of that movie was Tom Holland playing a dog, and he was only on screen for like 30 seconds.
Well, he had to stretch his acting chops, Andrew. You got to start somewhere.
Oh, okay. Moving on. With more Disney news. This one's just kind of sad. I didn't watch this, but I know a lot of people who are big fans. Disney has canceled the new animated DuckTales show that was on Disney XD. It was on Disney Plus to start, and then they moved it, and it's a shame because they've got a new Darkwing Duck in the works.
Okay, but is it? How long did the original DuckTales last? 3 seasons. How long is this one lasting? 3 seasons. It seems to be kind of a magic marker number for series, especially on the streaming platforms, that they do 3 seasons, recognize that they've hit their peak, let's go out on our own terms, as opposed to running it into the ground, lost, and then running it 2 or 3 seasons beyond its height. I think this is a good call.
I mean, it also just depends on the show. But you are right. It does seem like shows that debut on streaming services do not last as long. I'm sure there are plenty of factors that go into that. But this show it was beloved among its fans. So it is kind of a shame that, they decided to let it go.
And Andrea and I are big fans because we know that Scrooge McDuck is played by our very favorite doctor. Right?
David Tennant.
That's right.
Oh, you nerds. He said after being
t-shirt, man.
Hey, I'm
yes,
not
I'm gonna say says the guy with the Sean Connery James Bond poster in the background.
I was gonna say says the guy who clearly is expressing zero interest in Godzilla versus Kong.
What's Godzilla?
Well, Gary, let me tell you what a god is first. I'm just
offline.
That's an entire series of episodes I could do. So moving on. I don't necessarily think there's much to discuss about this, but I thought it was a very interesting tidbit of news that popped up. Paramount is open to the possibility of doing a 4th Godfather film. And this came up because The Godfather 3 is getting a re-release and recut. Hopefully a better cut I've never seen 3, but I've heard it's terrible. Um,
It's not terrible. It's just not Godfather 1 and Godfather 2.
well, when a film is as revered as Godfather 1 and 2, it's. But yeah, I found that interesting. I never saw 3, so I don't know where they would take The Godfather after that. But yeah, you're right, Gary. 1 and 2 are amazing. I need to rewatch them. It's been quite a few years.
Same, same,
I
same.
haven't seen either of them.
You have something to look forward to. I love those moments when someone says, I've never seen,
Mhm.
and then the other people in the room are like, oh my God, you've got to. Everybody has that look on their face of, really? Are you kidding? Are you mad? What's the matter with you? I mean, there's a lot of psychological things that you can dig out from underneath that very look of, really? What's really wrong with you? You haven't seen these films. But you have to hide that
It.
to just be in good company.
I prefer. There's a different reaction, and I prefer this one much more. You'll appreciate this, Gary, now that you're back into video gaming. I played the very first Uncharted on PlayStation 3 like 4 years after it came out. And when I posted about that, one of my friends said, oh my gosh, I wish I could be playing that again for the first time
Right.
and experiencing it that way. So if you should ever watch The Godfather, Andrea, I would love to experience those films for the first time again.
I've heard nothing but good things.
So yeah, don't ever knock someone for not having seen it or played something.
Relative to the films that are released today that you would consider violent, these films are practically benign, but they are so well crafted psychologically as well as in their production design and the performances and everything else that makes the Godfather series the Godfather series. But it resonates with you as well. So here we are. These pictures were released, Ben, in 72 and 74, if memory serves me correctly.
Oh, that sounds right.
But, so here we are, relatively speaking, 50 years later, and we're looking at these pictures as if they were made yesterday. They're that good.
You're correct, 72 and 74. So now that we all know when they were released, let's get to. I actually have one last bit of news. This dropped after I emailed out the itinerary, and I just think it's really cute. This would have been actually much more appropriate for last week's episode, which was a little bit about video games. So Oscar Isaac has reportedly been cast in the role of Solid Snake in the adaptation of the video game Metal Gear Solid, which is an espionage game. And I played the first one. There are 5 of them and various spin-offs. And all I can say is they are extraordinarily convoluted games that make zero sense, except for the first one kind of makes sense, kind of. But that's cool. He actually, I know he wanted to play the role, so congratulations, you got it. And of course, Oscar Isaac is coming off of the Star Wars trilogy, where he should have been utilized much better. But thankfully, we also have great movies like Inside Llewyn Davis and Ex Machina, in which he is incredible. And he's going to be in Dune, which is
I was just going to say, isn't he also going to be in Dune? Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's in Dune.
I just recently rewatched Ex Machina. It's an extraordinary film, and he's marvelous in it.
Yep.
So I can't see the guy outside of this genre or doing anything within the genre failing spectacularly, because he knows how to pick a script. That's just the evidence that's been mounting until now. And if he can get out of the genre and start doing some more dramatic roles as a result, as opposed to being stereotyped into a specific genre, he's got a big future ahead of him because he's just damn good.
Well, he the first time I ever saw him was he has a small role in Drive with Ryan Gosling. And gosh, he was in a movie, I think, with Jessica. I think was it with Jessica Chastain like a year later? Another drama, another big drama. He was doing. I didn't see Sucker Punch.
I didn't either, but I know he's in it.
I gave up on Zack Snyder after after Watchmen, and still saw his Batman and Justice League movies, and yeah.
My condolences.
Snyder cut.
Yep. Yep. Debuting on HBO Max, everyone. Yeah.
Someday, maybe.
So, and I think that's just cool with Oscar Isaac, and I think it's cool that I think it's kind of funny that we have a Metal Gear Solid movie and an Uncharted movie with Tom Holland in production at the same time. So that'll be fun. Hopefully, this will be the
Tom Holland in his native accent. I'm thoroughly convinced that the guy knows the American accent backwards and forwards. Now, tell me about this whole Kiwi accent, Tom, that you affect in these interviews, but you never seem to do it on screen, Tom. What aren't you telling us? I'm just saying.
A lot, apparently. That's it for the news this week. So we're gonna get
Bye.
into
Just kidding.
stole my bit.
Andrea and I will be back after the bump. And presuming the bump has just happened.
And we're talking tonight about Disney. And when I say we, I really mean Gary and Andrea are going to be sort of taking the lead on this one because we just spent a solid month of me going on about monster stuff. So and I am not the expert on Disney that that I theoretically should be, since I should be the expert on all things film. But uh, I'll chime in here and there. I will definitely let everyone know what my favorite Disney film is, that kind of thing. But I really do want to know, Andrea. I'll start with you. What is just the appeal for you, just with Disney as an entity?
Oh man. I think because I mean everyone really grew up on Disney. I think my very first movie that I remember seeing, I think, was The Lion King. Um, I believe it came out in '95 or '96. I was four, 94. Okay, I
I
was
believe it's
three.
'94.
I was three. And apparently my parents were telling me I was obsessed with it. Like I would play The Lion King, like I'd get my parents together and they would be Simba's parents and I would be Simba. And apparently that led to a horrifying theater career. And I like having them have relatable characters. Also, like if I see a movie, I mean this is true for all kids, I'm sure. Seeing a movie and being like, hey, that character does that weird thing that I do. I'm not alone in doing that weird thing. And maybe Disney was the first to do it. I don't know, but it's the first I remember seeing Disney characters do it. Their animation is always beautiful. Even their like crappy direct-to-video sequels have so pretty good animation, which is pretty great. And I don't know, just the whole appeal of magic and wonder, and of course the music. I love almost every single Disney soundtrack, and just I don't know, just the joy it brings, not just kids but adults, and the whole feeling of being a kid at heart. And it's just so many good memories are tied to a whole bunch of Disney movies that I've seen, and growing up with it and being like, my mom and dad made me watch Beauty and the Beast, and I used to hate it, but now Belle is one of my favorite Disney princesses. So it was just kind of that sort of nostalgic feeling, as well as looking at the kids nowadays, seeing these movies, being when you were their age, and they're your age now, and it's just you remember that feeling. You're like, oh, I remember see how these kids feel about Frozen. I felt about Pocahontas or Cinderella or whatever, and it's kind of it's a good feeling. I just really like seeing them even nowadays.
Gary, what is the appeal of Disney to you?
Well, my experience is a little bit different than Andrea's just because of the difference in what was being released and how it was being released when we were that 3 and 4 years old. I came into being a Disney fan kind of on the back end because in 1989, I was a music teacher. I was teaching Yamaha. And of course, what was really wildly popular was The Little Mermaid. And this was the beginning of the Disney Renaissance. So think The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Pocahontas, all those films that became so iconic in the 90s. I was already an adult and ostensibly earning a living. But the appeal was instantaneous because, as Andrea pointed out, the songs were so instantly catchy. I remember in 89 and 90 when The Little Mermaid took off like no other picture I'd ever seen. the kids couldn't be controlled because all of them were humming songs from the film. Part of Your World being the most iconic for the girls, and any of the other tunes were in the music halls all the time. Well, I had to go and play catch up, and actually, I bought the soundtrack. Okay, declared it brilliant. Then I went and saw the film, and subsequently brought the thing home on the clamshell VHS because it was just mind blowingly good. And this was coming from somebody who was a film student during school. And I'm looking at these pictures being released, and the type of animation that went into these films could be sat side by side on the shelf with any of the films that were made during Walt's era. They were just that good. And at the time, this was the new generation of Cal Arts. So you had Mark Henn, Andreas Deja, and you had John, who was, of course, an animator in the early 80s working in 2 dimensions. And then he goes off and works at Pixar and then becomes such an integral part, Lasseter I'm referring to the Disney Renaissance and then Pixar beyond that, and then back to Disney in the full fold. But the reason why these films were so successful is because of their universal appeal. They're beautiful to look at. They're fantastic to listen to. And most Disney folks will tell you that it's because of the storytelling. Disney, above all megalopoly companies that are releasing product today, focuses on the story. So it's very rare that you'll see a Disney picture being released and it falls completely flat because it doesn't have the story elements to carry it forward. That's almost always going to be there, to the point that the filmmakers agonize over every single detail. And that's part of that, the detail that goes into it, the storytelling, the music, the production design, holistically creates that appeal for me. When I go to see a Disney product, I know it's going to be somewhere between really good and blow my socks off.
Well, you both already kind of answered my second question, which is what are your earliest memories of Disney? I'll answer that question too real quick because so when I was little, my dad, of course, was a huge movie fanatic, and he already had all of the clamshell VHSs. Um, so I specifically remember he had the original clamshell release of Sleeping Beauty, which no one had. And I didn't even know about that until years later when it was re-released in widescreen. And of course, my dad made a huge hubbub about that. He was like, "We have to get this movie in widescreen. You don't understand how important that is." Um, but I was also raised on Winnie the Pooh, the Winnie the Pooh shorts. Um, that was what I fell asleep to. Um, so if I wasn't if I wasn't falling asleep to Frankenstein and the Wolfman, it was Winnie the Pooh, and I think that's one of the only things that that my mom could say was a good thing about my childhood was, oh, good, it's one of the few things that he's watching that's not going to scar him for life or be weird.
And think about how those properties they continue today. Winnie the Pooh that I grew up with Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. Those were the iconic 3 films, the 3 shorts that made up life in the late 60s and early 70s and was replayed on The Wonderful World of Disney for we who were around before the cable days. And then they release new films and new series with these characters that they've licensed through A.A. Milne's estate for years. So we had Christopher Robin that just came out last year. It was okay, but it was still those characters in the forefront. You had Winnie the Pooh that came out in 2011, Winnie the Pooh's the Tigger movie, and there were several other standalone films from those characters that did very well. And so there's no reason why these pictures, as long as good storytelling continues, these characters can't persist and be introduced to a new generation so that anyone that's coming up, they can grow up with those characters just like Andrea did and just like I did, even though she and I are a generation apart.
Sorry to be a dumb millennial here, but what is a clamshell VHS?
So most VHSs came in the paper box that you just slid out.
Oh, was it like that plastic hardcover thing?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I have a bunch of
like
those
that.
too. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dog got fussy, so he came up here.
Your dog is cute, so it's all good.
That's okay. I've got 4 cats here
Oh,
right now, and I'm waiting for one of them to bug me.
they crawl on the desk, make a cameo appearance.
Appropriate enough, his name is Frodo, so.
Well, one of my earliest Disney memories is actually from the parks, because as much as I'm a fan of the films, I'm equally as much a fan of the parks. And I remember I was 5 years old. I grew up in Fresno, so Disneyland was 3.5, 4 hours away. But I didn't grow up with riches, and Disneyland was a once in every several years proposition for us. But I do remember being in the park somewhere near the castle. My memory says you were 5, and it was the wishing well just immediately to the right of Sleeping Beauty Castle if you're facing the castle. And I remember I didn't know the character's name at the time, but now I know it's what do they call him? Long John Foulfellow, the one of the heavies in Pinocchio, and his sidekick, the cat Gideon. So the two of them were there, and Pinocchio was there. And I remember getting really irritated with John Foulfellow because he was picking on Pinocchio. And I remember saying, "Are is this one picking on you?" And Pinocchio would shake his head, and of course, I just was indignant in my own 5-year-old voice and wagging my finger in John Foulfellow's, suit, because of course it's just a fur character. But it was believable to me. It was believable to a 5-year-old that I was rescuing Pinocchio from this villain. And that is part of the magic. And of course, at an early age, that informed my love for Disney, which I guess from Disney's point of view is the point. It ensures consumers for the future.
My earliest memory was not Lion King. I just remember my parents telling me about Lion King, but was in our old house where we were at. We had one TV, and it was one of those curved front ones, and we had a VHS player and cable. And when I was sick one day, my dad took the TV and put it in my room, and my room was really messy, as kids' rooms are. And the only place he could put it was my closet. So I remember him putting it in my closet, and I would sit right in front of the TV, like kids do, like this close to the TV. And I remember the one movie that I wanted to watch that one day, and that was Cinderella. So we had that one on VHS, and I remember seeing Lucifer the cat and Bruno the dog. And that at the end when Bruno chases Lucifer out the spoiler alert, chases him out the window and Lucifer falls. And I go, well, at least he's dead now. And my my mom heard, and she came in and she was like, Andrea, what are you talking about? And I said, Lucifer the cat is dead. And she said, no, cats have 9 lives. Lucifer is still alive, honey. And I went, oh, okay. And I don't know how that's a really random memory, but it is my earliest memory. So I think it is relevant. And then later that I think it was either that Halloween or the Halloween after, I went as Cinderella, the Disney movie Cinderella, and they had like a whole deluxe costume kit. And so I got a dress, and I got the little poofy things on the side, and the choker, and even a little crown, and I had shoes. And I begged my dad to get me glass shoes, and he said, no way. So I just wore the shoes that came with the costume, which was like those little kid shoes with like, they have their shoe and then they have like the strap over the top like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like 5. So I remember watching Cinderella, and I was sick in my closet and being glad that Lucifer died, even though he didn't, and dressing as Cinderella for Halloween.
Interesting side note on Cinderella, which is kind of a dovetail to what you had mentioned earlier, Ben, about Peter, your dad, going ape over the widescreen release of that particular picture. And even both Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, both princess films, were released just a few years apart from one another and both well ensconced in the Walt era. Cinderella was shot in Academy ratio, but by the time you get to the end of the 50s, all of a sudden, all of the studios were realizing that they were losing revenue to TV. So Sleeping Beauty and all those gorgeous background paintings by Ivan Earl was shot in CinemaScope. So Super 70 this beautiful widescreen picture, which even on today's 16 by 9 sets, even if you have a gorgeous 65-inch, while it looks great, it's still not the big screen. You still lose an awful lot trying to get these gorgeous oil backgrounds into a format where you can actually look at the art the way it was intended by the director. And that's on a big screen. It's the only way you can see it.
Uh, to that point, Gary, I actually bought the Blu-ray that was released last year and popped that in on my 55-inch 4K and was like, oh my god. Again, yeah, it's I've never seen Sleeping Beauty in a cinema. But that's the closest I'll ever get. And it was like, holy crap, there's so much more color seeing it in 4K than I ever realized.
Right. And I'm right there with you. I revisited the film last year when it was re-released in 4K. And again, all of these backgrounds are popping like I had never seen before. And I have a whole new appreciation for the picture for that reason. But even though I'm a couple of years older than you, I too haven't seen the film on the big screen. And if I did, even back in the 70s, that was, as far as I'm concerned, that was the nadir of movies. And the reason for that is a long story in and of itself. So I'll just skim on the surface here. In the 70s and in the 80s, cost cutting was the order of the day, and Disney was certainly just as guilty under the Eisner era as every other studio. And because television was really starting to pilfer audiences, those that were producing tentpole films in that era were relying on films that didn't have the spectacle of Cinerama or 235:1 aspect ratios that are, you can compensate for that today, but in those days they started favoring 185:1 so that it was playable in smaller auditoriums. And so they were making smaller films and films that would fit the capacity of these smaller auditoriums and be more, what's that word? Profitable. And it's only with the advent of 4K and the forthcoming 8K and the lack of a need for a talented projectionist, the lack of a need for appropriate equipment that produced enough lumens to actually put on a good show. In the 70s and 80s, they were willing to compromise the show in order to save money. But now with the 2000s, 3D came into play, digital projection came into play, and the need for talented projectionists, unfortunately, has also gone by the wayside. But it also, on the other hand, ensures a better show. And because now we're relying so much on streaming for everything, I think that there's a turning point here, which harkens back to our original discussion at the top of the show, where films are going to be presented in a way that today's generation has never seen before, because the studios need to get butts back in the seats, which right now doesn't happen.
Oh, Gary, you said the phrase that scares me so much, and that's 8K. I'm not ready for that. I'm just a year into 4K, and I want to hang on to it for a little while.
That makes two of it. I mean, so much looks so good in 4K at home. It's such a far cry from just 20 years ago when we took those clamshell cases out and threw in a VHS of Sleeping Beauty, and little did we realize, well, I may have as a film student, and perhaps you as well, but most of the kids growing up didn't realize that they were only seeing half the picture. That even though it filled their square screen, the film was shot in a very long rectangle. Well, the only way to fit a rectangle inside of a square is in the middle of that square. Well, they didn't do that in those days, and as well they shouldn't have. It would have really compromised it. But using a pan and scan technique just made matters worse because you really lost the art of the film.
Yep. Yep, it was those Disney films and the original Star Wars trilogy that my dad used to say, "Hey, this is how it's supposed to be seen." And I didn't believe him for a while until he finally showed me a couple of those, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there is so much more going on here than I knew about," and I love it.
I've got goosebumps, and it's not a Disney film, but it's a Disney fan, so I feel like I can get some grace here. Spielberg's Empire of the Sun, 1987. That was my picture. That was the first film I saw at home in widescreen and recognized this is a whole new world. This is how this picture is supposed to be seen. More needs to be done like this. And it took years. So many people saying it's not full screen. No, it is full screen. It's just geometry.
I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here since you brought up Disney parks, and I have a confession to make to you two and to the world at large. I still have not been to a Disney park.
La 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 la. I'm not listening.
Not everyone has.
Yep.
That's true.
I was, we were that family that didn't go on big vacations when I was a kid. So, it just never happened. So we'll
And
see
I
one
never
day.
became a Disney Parks fan until I was an adult, Ben. So, more power to you. You'll get
Yeah.
there eventually and probably get suckered like the rest of us because it's just that good.
Well, they keep tempting me every year by saying we're going to add more Star Wars stuff and we're going to add more Marvel stuff, and it's like, man, um,
Andrea, have you been since Rise of the Resistance?
Yeah, I went in October of last year.
So you've been on
Oh,
the
not the ride. Sorry, no, I haven't been to Rise of the Resistance yet.
Okay.
Sorry, thinking something else.
Not
I went on
yet?
the Smuggler's Run, but that
Yes.
was it.
Rise of the Resistance just hadn't opened by the time you were there, correct?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What did it open in Disneyland too? That same because I went to Disneyland. I didn't go to World, but
Yeah, I think it opened in Disney. I would be speaking out of turn. I'd have to look it up. All I can say is, Ben, Rise of the Resistance is worth the ticket price by itself.
yeah, I really want to do it. I really want to do it.
well, I have to make a choice. It's either that or I go to Japan and do the zip line into Godzilla's mouth. So we'll see which one comes first. Gary, you've kind of started talking about this, so I'm going to ask Andrea. How do you feel that Disney has changed the landscape of the film industry?
Oh man. Um, well, in a lot of cases, it depends on who you ask, but Disney was the first to do a lot of things. I mean, first he had Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and that like catapulted him into the spotlight. Not fame yet, but the spotlight. He got noticed, and he went to the what was it like a Gary? What was it? Not in a newspaper, but it was like a they animated his cartoon, but it wasn't Disney yet. But it was Walt Disney himself.
Well, it was Paramount that distributed Oswald the Lucky
Paramount,
Rabbit.
yes, thank you, Paramount, thank you. It left my mind. Thank you. Sorry. Anyway, but I started with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and then of course the ever popular Steamboat Willie came after that, and that was a huge thing for a lot of people because a lot of people hadn't seen that before. Mixing animation with sound in sync. So that was a first too, and it was in black and white, but of course everything was back then. And of course, um, uh, there was something before Snow White. It was like Fun and Fancy Free or something like that. No, that was after. But anyway,
If you're
I'll skip
thinking
that
of
one.
the Old Mill, perhaps the short
Probably.
that
It was the
preceded
first
Snow White.
color cartoon with sound, but it wasn't Snow White. It
That
was
was
like a
Flowers and Trees.
Flowers and Trees. Yes, thank you. See, I knew Gary would know this.
This is why Ben
And then,
pays me the
of
big
course,
bucks.
yeah, the I think the thing that pretty much started this whole entire, I don't want to say movie industry, that's not true, but animated movie industry was of course Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because it was the first full length animated film with synchronous sound, synchronous music, voice actors, um, cells, and everything. And every time I watch Snow White, I think about how was it 37?
Yeah,
1937?
that's right.
Yes. Ha. Okay. In 1937, during the Great Depression, when movies were pretty much the only form of escape, going into the cinema and seeing that movie for the very first time, it just blows my mind when you think about it. Not even if you're a kid, even if you're an adult, and you see this thing happening right in front of you on the big-ish screen for the very first time. Like what? It's got to be amazing to think about. I mean, pretty much right now, we're pretty much in another Great Depression, but like, it's just, yeah, anyway, see, my mind just thinks about that every time I watch it, and I'm like, that, being there in 1937, seeing that movie for the first time, and you're Walt Disney, and you're like, wow, people love this movie. I'm gonna do something with this. This is gonna be awesome. So I think Snow White and I mean it all started with the rabbit, but that whole entire thing I think really just catapulted not only Walt Disney but animation into the spotlight. And since then, it's just been fantastic animation after fantastic animation, give or take a few. And it's just it really did change the way that people saw movies. Like live action ones people could watch all the time, but to go into the cinema and see a cartoon that was 90 minutes long with sound and music and color, it was just it started everything. And I think that it was yeah, anyway. That's what I think. I think it just paved the way for animation, and look where we are now with CGI and all that stuff. To see hand drawn is almost obsolete now, and it's just kind of it started that way.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they didn't have any real competition in the full length animation category
Right.
for several years. I mean, the Warner Brothers had their shorts.
Yeah,
Uh,
but a 90-minute cartoon, yeah, that has never been done before.
the most successful I can think of, um, apart from Disney, the earliest I can think of is like Don Bluth with Land Before Time and American Tail. That those films. Um, I can't really think of anything that predates Don Bluth that is as strong
Yeah.
as Disney. Yeah, so that is a good chunk. We're only about a century into a little over a century into the history of film, and Disney really has dominated the animation category. So that is extraordinarily significant, and we will be talking about a very important CG film later in the episode because of a certain anniversary this year. Um, so so tell me about the musicals. How did the musicals sort of come to be? Because you have the American musicals that became very popular in the 50s. How did those inspire Disney, and how did Disney kind of change the landscape of musicals as we know it?
Gary, why don't you take this one?
Well, we have to think about what the product was at the time. There was such a novel, um, fanciful way of looking at motion pictures at the time. And from 1929, when you had the Broadway Review of 1929, which introduced music on film, the two were practically inextricable. You had straight plays that were filmed and shot and presented, and those were wildly popular of their own accord. But there was never really a time with the advent of sound that musicals weren't a part of the Disney pantheon of films. They were always there. From, if you think about the shorts that were really the test bed for the products that we see in the feature films, they are the sound and the music is inextricable from the picture. Silly Symphonies is an entire short category that was designed from its inception in 1929, Skeleton Dance, thank you very much, to be musicals, mini musicals. So to go 8 years later or into production in 35 and 36 on Snow White and the Seven Dwarves and have that be a musical was never a question. It was always going to be a part of the film. And that persisted throughout the Walt era. Each and every single animated film during Walt's lifetime, music was inextricable from the narrative. And that includes pictures like Sleeping Beauty, which are largely fairy tales where the narrative drives the product, but there are still notable songs in that. And then there are pictures more like Cinderella, for example, or Snow White, where the music is integral. The songs are integral to telling the story. And that was a part of the Disney canon from the get go. And then there are reasons that Walt actually would go out of his way to make sure that music was a part of it because it is a universal language. When it was a period of austerity during World War II, you had made mention of this picture, um, Melody Time, Fun and Fancy Free, and there was a third package film, which not my memory is not being jogged at the moment, but that's okay. Where these were actually shorts, musical shorts that were put together as a package and then marketed as a feature length film. And the only reason that these films carried over at all wasn't because you had this gorgeous multi-plane camera animation. They didn't throw a lot of money at these pictures, but they were popular because of the music. They would engage artists like the Andrews Sisters or Benny Goodman was engaged, and their popular music at the time was put to animation. And because the music was popular and because Disney was popular, these films were able to carry over and get the company through these austere times until they could actually start producing full-length feature films like Snow White, Peter Pan, Sleeping Beauty, which all happened in the 50s, post-war austerity having been resolved.
Gary, were you thinking of the Three Caballeros?
No, that predated
Okay.
the package films. Fun and Fancy Free, Melody Time, and somebody out there is yelling at their screen. It's sorry.
That's the only one I could think of, so wasn't sure.
Thank you for that, Gary. You're just a crazy wealth of knowledge.
A wealth of
Human
something
encyclopedia.
Yep.
when it comes to Disney. And you have to think about it, just put things in a timeline. I started studying Disney in 1989, 1990. And that's when I started becoming an amateur Disney historian and animation fan, especially the feature animation. So you begin to acquire this knowledge organically. It's not as though I've sat down and read dozens and dozens of books and committed all this stuff to memory on purpose. It just happens.
I packed a Disney animation book the other day at work, and I was like, oh, how appropriate. I should sneak this out of the warehouse for Gary and get fired. Here's an easy question that's not going to jog too many memories regarding history. That's simply, what is your favorite Disney film?
It hasn't been mentioned so far, which I'm very grateful for.
I have to
Andrea,
think
please
about
go
it.
first.
So
Oh, I get to go first? Okay. How about
Go ahead,
Ben
Gary.
go first?
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Well,
Ben, go first.
mine also has not been mentioned, and it's not even in the categories that we've been talking about. It's a live action Disney film from the 50s, and that would be 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
My dad loves
Um,
that movie.
I have been absolutely fascinated with the ocean and the creatures that dwell within it for my entire life. So, um, so yeah, to get a live action film that really does dive right in, literally, and give us a nice up close look at a lot of those things. Like, I didn't, when I was a kid, I wasn't in tune with what the story was about. I love the part where they go hunting for food. And of course, the giant squid was just the coolest thing for me back then. But, as I got older, I could also, of course, appreciate the tragic story of Captain Nemo and his desire to end all conflict among men. And I've of course since read the book a couple times, and even though the book, there's so much more to the book than you get to see in the movie, it's still a very good adaptation, in that it takes the absolute core of what the book is trying to get at and just throws it right up there on the screen. And it's also just an impressive technical achievement because, of course, in 1954, no one was doing that kind of underwater photography. Nice bit of trivia. One other movie released that year also did some extensive underwater photography, and that is Creature from the Black Lagoon. But that was black and white. 20,000 Leagues was like the first color film to really do that. And even since then, really, the only other movie I think that's done that much intense, detailed underwater photography is Thunderball, the James Bond movie. Like, no one has done really as much underwater photography in a film as
I think Gary wants to say something.
What do you want to say, Gary?
All I can say is that every single cast member of The Abyss that's watching this is going like this to Ben Stahl. The Abyss takes the cake for all of the underwater photography, don't you think?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, the amount they do, yeah, but there's just, you don't get quite the extent of like what it's like to be in a living ocean.
That is a point that no one has ever brought up before, because literally The Abyss was shot in tanks. Even a tank, the big tank that they were using, was actually an abandoned nuclear facility, a nuclear containment silo. So you're right. In terms of open ocean, they didn't really do a whole lot, whereas they would have done much more for the two films that you cite.
And we are, of course, allowed to talk about The Abyss now because it is officially a Disney film now that Fox is owned by Disney.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
there.
it's on the radar. In fact, as I understand it, James Cameron is actually working on the 4K remaster and has been for a while, but he's of course distracted working on the next 12 Avatar sequels.
Um,
Tell us what you really think, Ben.
I think Avatar was very beautiful and very not great with the story.
Or you can just get the whole 4-hour experience in 90 minutes and just watch Fern Gully,
Yep. Um,
which I actually like.
yeah.
Okay, I have one.
So that, yeah, I've blathered on long enough. Go ahead.
Okay. This is a no judgment zone, right? If we say our favorite Disney movie.
Well, I mean,
Our,
we can't
our,
judge you out loud for sure.
Okay.
our
I'm
safe
kidding.
word
Okay.
is
You're good
eating.
here.
I actually I like, first of all, I really like the underrated ones. The ones that really aren't musicals. I'm gonna cheat and say two that I like because I can't pick between the two of them. The first one, it actually was during the Dark Ages, the Disney Dark Ages in the 80s, and that is Oliver and Company.
Mhm.
I love Oliver and Company. I like Oliver Twist first of all because it's based on Oliver Twist, and I love the music. I love Billy Joel, and I love dogs. So what's not to like? Dom DeLuise is in it also, and I like Dom DeLuise.
Bette
And
Midler.
I just think overall it's a very very cute movie. It's pretty dark as most Disney movies are and as most 80s movies are, but I just it's so wholesome. There's a little girl and a little baby kitty, and what's not to like about that? And I think it's severely underrated, and it just I think it's underrated because it fell during the Dark Ages. Really, if it had come out like later on, I think maybe it would have been a bigger hit. But it's just I really like it, and Bette Midler is in it, which I think is probably the greatest thing ever. And Gary's laughing. Um, my
You're not
second one,
wrong.
my second one is also an underrated one, and that actually came out. There's like I don't know the official term of it, but it's like the second Dark Ages, like the during the early 2000s, and that's Treasure Planet. I think it's I think it is a visually stunning film. They mix the animation with CGI, and they made I forgot the tactic they used, but it was the first time they've ever used it where it's hand drawn, but it's 3D hand drawn, and it was really prominent on the cyborg when he uses his little cyborg arm. You can see it there. It's not CGI, it's hand drawn. It was like rendered 3D or something like that. It's really cool, and I actually read Treasure Island, and it is the closest adaptation to the book that I have ever seen, which is kind of weird when you think about it because it's in outer space. But I love Treasure Island also, and I think the adaptation from book to movie is pretty good. Obviously, they changed a few things, you know, but got a stellar voice cast. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in it, David Hyde Pierce, Emma Thompson, and the Goo Goo Dolls did the music. So like I don't know. I just those two movies, they're both very underrated. I think they're both really wholesome stories, and um, I wish more people would appreciate them. And I feel like because they aren't musicals, they kind of slipped under the radar. And they both fell during their respective dark ages of Disney history, and they're overlooked a lot. But I really really love both of those movies.
I love that you've referenced the two dark periods of Disney's canon, and one just needs to examine the films themselves and take them on their own merit rather than trying to put them into context of, well, you're comparing Atlantis to Beauty and the Beast. They're two completely different
Yeah.
animals. You would be more accurate to compare, say, The Rescuers Down Under to Treasure Planet, because in terms of genre comparison, both 2D animated films, both are narrative driven. They're not songs. It's not like you're going to take your lead character and you're about 15 minutes in the film. Oh, it's time for the princess to tell the world what she wants. It's not that kind of predictability. But if you take stock of the films themselves, they're very good. Even pictures in the first Dark Ages, like The Fox and the Hound, not a musical, still an amazing film. As you, I'm trying to remember the film as they released it. The Mouse on Basil Street The Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company. Those films predate just by a couple of years The Little Mermaid, when everything exploded again once we got back into the princess era. But they were basing these stories on books and properties that already existed and told those stories very well. What they didn't do for both Dark Ages, they weren't a catalyst. And that's what was missing, especially in the early aughts. Shrek comes out and shakes up the industry around the same time Atlantis comes out. How can you compare this shiny new toy, CG, especially with the raucous bathroom humor that represents DreamWorks and the Shrek properties, to the beautiful 2D work that was done in Atlantis, which is a very solid story, but the audience was ready for something new. And at that time, we didn't get it. So, favorite Disney film, since that was your original question. I have to have three, not because I'm trying to one-up anyone, but because Disney has three distinct eras and genre of film. Walt's live action, Walt's 2D animation, and then the 3D CG animation that's current. And it's the latter, I'll say, is Big Hero 6. That picture is just to the brim with
I'm sorry,
heart.
Gary, what did you say?
Big Hero 6.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry.
And that film, without fail, there will be tears. It's just a really good story. In Walt's era, I have to go with Fantasia. It's a film that I keep going back to. I don't have to watch all 2 hours and 30 minutes of the thing. I can watch just one part of that concert and feel satisfied. And then in live action, I have to put my hat in the ring for something that's a little controversial, but in terms of the history, what we have learned since then, as well as just telling a really good story, Song of the South. It's a very good live action film. Yes, I know it's controversial and I respect all the reasons, but in terms of filmmaking from its era, it's a very good film. Just like you would call Gone with the Wind or Rebecca very good films, so is Song of the South.
Just because it's controversial, that doesn't mean it's not good.
Agreed. We could do a whole show just on Song of the South.
Oh, I have to add as a runner-up though, Robin Hood. Robin Hood is just a really fun movie, and I love it.
Oh yeah. I will say, Treasure Planet is absolutely incredible. I missed a huge chunk of Disney, a period of Disney when I was too cool for kid stuff. And Treasure Planet was one my dad really got into, and he was like, "You need to watch this one. We need to watch this movie." And I'd read Treasure Island before, and was like, "Okay, fine, I'll sit down and we'll watch this one." I was like, "Oh my god, what a wonderful adaptation this was!" So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Treasure Planet, awesome. Okay, moving on. Andrea, this is your time to shine because you have a connection to Disney that Gary and I cannot have. Well, we can, but we choose not to.
My feet fit in the slippers, but they're kind of shaped like that, and then my toe pops out.
I don't know, Gary. I think you would make a very stellar Aurora.
No, not seeing it.
Just go like this.
Only if I get a pretty prince that's going to come kiss me.
So, Andrea, tell us about what it is that you do. That
Okay. For those at home watching who don't know, I am a part-time princess. So I basically do birthday parties and events as Disney princesses, and I'm not allowed to say that it's Disney princesses. They're princesses from fairy tales that have been made into movies by Disney. Just for copyright reasons, I'm not allowed to officially say that's what it is, but it is. So we also do superheroes, so MCU related. But basically, I just dress up as princesses and go to these events and parties for little kids, and little kids really love it. And I have a lot of fun doing it, so I really love it.
So yeah, for those of you out there, if you need a princess, when preferably when we're not in the middle of a pandemic and these types of gatherings can be had again. Also, I'm sure it's not that fun to do right now in the winter, anyways.
Well, we do our ice sisters are very popular.
Oh.
You can guess which two I'm talking about, but they're very popular in the winter because the ice queen has ice powers, and all the little kids are like, "Use your ice powers," and she's like, "Haha, no."
I don't
But
remember Flipper and Bambi having ice powers.
I can. Did you want me to talk a little bit more about that, about the princesses themselves? Because I can if you want.
If there's anything more that you would like to say, then absolutely. If you feel like you have spoken your truth, then we can move on if you would like.
Okay, I will say a quick blurb. I used to, before I did this, I used to not be into princesses at all. I started in college, so I was slightly older. I think I was about 25 or so, 24 when I started doing it. So every time before then, after I grew out of princesses, I was never really into them anymore because they didn't appeal to me because I wasn't a little kid. And then I started getting interested in theater, obviously, which ruined my life. And then I noticed that the Disney parks had the Disney College program came to my campus, and they were talking about all the different jobs you could have there, and one of them was character performer. And I'm sure Gary knows what I'm talking about when I say that. But if you don't know what a character performer is, I'll go into that a little bit. It's basically the actors who are the characters at the park. So you're either wearing the fur characters, which is like the Mickey Mouse and the Minnie Mouse with the mask on, or you're a face character, which is like the princesses and the princes. And when I figured out that I could do that as a college student, I got really, really excited. Unfortunately, I missed the deadline to apply because I had a job and it ruined everything. But that kind of flipped the switch for me because I was like, that looks like a lot of fun. And Frozen had actually come out later that year. And I was working at the Disney store. And about every 10 seconds or so, a mom would come up to me and just go, "You look like that younger sister from that movie that just came out. Wow, do you play her at the parks?" I was like, I wish I could. I really do. I look like Princess Anna, by the way, for those watching. So I was like, okay, well, if one more person tells me that, I might as well audition and get paid for it. So lo and behold, I kind of looked up how to do it like locally, since obviously I couldn't do it at the parks. And basically it was kind of a new thing. I don't remember it when I was a kid, but party princesses. I think they have always had like the clowns and stuff and that would come to parties, but I don't remember princesses themselves. So I Googled it, and there was a company that was pretty close to my college, and they were actually casting. So I went and I auditioned, and they said, "Why do you want to do this?" I was like, "I don't know. It looks like a lot of fun." And people have told me I look like Princess Anna. So I might as well get paid to look exactly like her. And they're like, "Yeah, you do." I'm like, yeah. So basically, I started doing that, and it became really, really fun because at first I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, this is really dumb. I'm just looking like a princess. But when I see how much the kids like it, the kids are like, "Wow, oh my gosh, the snow princess is at my party. This is so cool. She's singing her songs. It's so cool." And I'm kind of like, that's really sweet. Like they really like this. And it's just, if I can't do it at the parks, I want to do it like here, bring the parks to them. And I would love to be a character performer someday, but unfortunately I have aged out of it. But here, I have not aged out of it, and I can do it until I look old. Even then, I could play like the fairy godmother or something. But basically, it all started when the Disney College program came in. So if you're a college student, apply for that because it's a really, really great opportunity. And don't mess it up like I did. But it's a lot of fun. And seeing the joy it brings to the kids really makes me smile. Every once in a while, I'll get a heckler that says, "You're not the real Anna." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah? Well, you're not the real whatever your name is." And they're like, so I always got it in my pocket. Anyway, that's the story I have to tell.
And yeah, I just want to say thank you because I remember a while back you sent me a link to play a Doctor Strange, and I was like, I think this was like right before lockdown started, and it's like, Man, if everyone else is watching out there, I still bemoan the fact that I am not the Ben that got Doctor Strange, because damn it, I do kind of look like him. I'm gonna hop over to our Facebook page here, because I asked everyone, what is your favorite Disney movie, and I forgot to throw that in there when we were talking about our own. So here's some shout outs here. Sarah, who is one of my regular panelists on the show, says Moana and Brave. Jed, who you both know, um, says Mary Poppins, The Little Mermaid, and another Moana. Sherston says Wally and 101 Dalmatians and Princess and the Frog. Steve Terry says Snow White and Fantasia. He's a fan of the pre-World War II films. Randy says Fantasia and Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Oh, Sean Connery. Oh, rest in peace. Mary says Fantasia, Little Mermaid, Lilo and Stitch. Jeanette, who has also been on the show for that first Halloween episode, says The Fox and the Hound, The Little Mermaid, and Coco. Debbie says Lilo and Stitch. And Marit, who was on our second episode way back in the day, says The Little Mermaid. Got a lot of love for Moana and The Little Mermaid out there.
People really like the ocean, apparently.
It's a fun place.
I gotta throw something out about Moana. First of all, there's a real appeal to that picture on a lot of different levels. The first of which is, as you pointed out, Andrea, the art, the CG rendering of all of the ocean scenes, and the ocean, of course, becomes a character in the film. What I recently learned is that Lin-Manuel Miranda, who co-wrote the songs in that picture, he co-wrote those songs before the Hamilton phenomenon. So he was booking gigs based on his experience through In the Heights, and yes, he was actively working during production of Moana on Hamilton. And even during some of the making of documentaries that I've seen, you can see his hair literally getting longer as he's preparing for the role and getting his Hamilton ponytail going. But it's just another credit to bringing in songwriters and talent that lend so much to these films. Really, would Frozen be the film that it is without the song composition that went into it and its integration into the narrative of the story? And there are some films that may be more action heavy, or they are more reliant upon the script, such as The Incredibles. But can you imagine those pictures without the iconic Michael Giacchino score? They're just incredible films. The way they are crafted, every single element is given equal weight in terms of its importance to tell the story.
And Christopher Jackson, who plays George Washington in Hamilton, did the singing voice for Moana's dad.
Perfect. Didn't know that.
All right, so we're gonna move on to sort of the last big segment of this whole thing here, and that's because this year, just 2 weeks ago today, I believe, Toy Story, the original Toy Story, turned 25 years old. And what an incredible, influential film that has been. So we were all, of course, alive when Toy Story was released to theaters. So I wanna go around and ask, do you remember the first time that you saw Toy Story? Let's start with you, Gary, because I'm sure you remember.
Oh yeah, I was 28 and I saw it in the theater, and just like everybody else, my jaw was on the floor. There was just nothing like this on the big screen ever. And I was a fan there in those days, from about 1988, 89, somewhere in there. Right thinking companies were marketing VHS as well as Laserdisc, if either one of you remember those. Student and corporate produced computer animated films. These were all test films, pushing the technology more than anything else. And they were short. It was just, hey, look what we can do. But in the early 80s, what a few people don't realize is that a major series of motion pictures, Star Trek II and Star Trek III, the animation for the planet that was being terraformed was all done by early Pixar. which was at the time owned by Lucasfilm. So all of these student projects and experimental projects like Wally B, Tintoy, which won an Academy Award, these were all to germinate into the first feature and CG animated film. It's an analog to 1935, 36, before Snow White was done. You had all these test materials, such as the Old Mill that we'd referenced earlier, and the even the Mickey Mouse shorts, and certainly the Silly Symphonies. Those were all a test bed to produce the techniques that evolved into Snow White. These short films that were a proving ground for the technology is what lent itself to developing Toy Story, which had the same detractors as you had with Snow White. Mostly, nobody's going to sit through a CG film for 90 minutes. We did, and we loved it.
Andrea, do you remember the first time seeing Toy Story?
Nope. I was 4. I don't remember seeing it. Sorry, I don't have a story because I don't remember seeing it.
I definitely don't have Gary's story because I was old enough to remember seeing it, but I don't remember what movie theater we went to. And of course, I was young enough that at the time I didn't comprehend how important this film was. But my jaw was similarly on the floor because no cartoon had ever looked like this before, that I had ever seen. So, it was just, and to top it all off, it wasn't just technologically impressive. Again, it's just an absolutely delightful story. And we had to buy this film, and we, probably watched Toy Story. I don't know how many times we watched Toy Story at home. I mean, I remember we watched it so many times, and then at school they asked us what we wanted to watch, and it was still Toy Story, even though we'd watched it a billion times at home. So,
and it makes the film important, not necessarily just for the film itself, and seeming personal issues aside and opinions about the man, Lasseter, fantastic storyteller, very capable animator back in his days. I mean, he was part of that Cal Arts movement where you had folks like Brad Bird that came and John Clements that came from that era, producing incredible 2D product, and 3D was the natural extension to the art that they learned in the 70s and early 80s. And since CG was the heir apparent as the tool to tell these stories, and Pixar was just at the right place at the right time. And most of these animators and directors will tell you that CG is simply a tool. It's another way of telling a story. And Lasseter also will be the first one to tell you that Toy Story in 1995 was iconic for what it began. It was the Snow White of the mid-90s, if you will. And they've went on to make some stellar, in fact, every single one of them. Again, I had alluded to Disney films being somewhere between very good and jaw on the floor. Every single Pixar film falls into that same mold, whether it's before Disney acquired it or after, doesn't matter. So much focus is made on the story, on it having heart. That's what appeals to these films, and that the technological advances that they make with every picture is just part of that process. They're still here to tell a brilliant story. And then you've got pictures that are coming up, like 2 of my favorite Pixar films. One is Coco, which in terms of its design elements is a stunner. It is a great looking film, so evocative of the characters that they were trying to produce and the environments. Now compare that to the upcoming Soul, which artistically, it's not Wall-E. It's not even Brave. But in terms of its telling the story and using the tools that are available to tell that story, no one does it better. And that's what Toy Story started. Not because of the technology, which is just the tool, but because they are storytellers first.
Every single Pixar movie has the crying scene.
Oh, just try to get through the first 15 minutes of Up without being wrecked. Not possible.
Or the end of Coco.
Oh. Yeah. Right there with you.
Bing Bong scene in Inside Out.
Yep.
Wrecked every time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only difference in that comparison you make to Snow White is that I mentioned earlier that it took a long time for other studios to jump on the animation. I won't say bandwagon, but this time around, we already mentioned Shrek. It only took other studios 6 years to crack the code and figure out how to compete. I'm not saying that any of them are nearly as good as Pixar. The closest for me is the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy is the closest any studio has gotten to doing a Pixar film.
And who directed that? Dubois and Sanders. Where did they come from? Lilo and Stitch. Disney.
But yeah, Toy Story has changed the landscape of animation. Even Disney Studios, their own Disney Animation, has gone from traditional hand-drawn 2D to CG 3D.
Yeah, Big Hero 6 that I had mentioned earlier, that's under
Yep.
the Disney banner. Moana under the Disney banner
Yep.
as well. Wreck-It Ralph, both of those films are very, very good. Love
Don't
those
forget
films.
Tangled,
Tangled, yep, 2010. Absolutely.
Frozen, one of their biggest hits of all time.
Right, of course. And I would argue, please disagree with me, Andrea. That way we have something to bicker about and we can just let Ben go get some tea or something. Frozen 2, Frozen 1. I prefer Frozen 2.
Frozen 1's better.
Why?
Frozen 2 kind of defeated the whole plot of Frozen 1, and their soundtrack was way worse.
Okay. Okay, interesting.
Because in Frozen, Elsa and Anna learn to work together. Elsa figures out she needs Anna, and Anna figures out she needs Elsa. And in Frozen 2, they separate again. Because Elsa's like, oh, I don't want to hurt you, Anna, and that defeats the whole purpose of the first movie.
I see your point. Now I have to watch both films and look at them through
And-
that lens.
And Olaf's part. Olaf is hilarious, and I love Olaf. But he was only in half of the movie in the first Frozen. He was in the whole movie in the second Frozen, and you can only take so much Olaf at a time. I love Josh Gad, and I love Olaf.
Are you saying that Olaf is the Jar Jar Binks of the Disney
I am not.
Okay.
Do
Jar
not
Jar
say that
Binks
name.
is the Jar Jar Binks of.
Jar Jar Binks is in a class all his own.
And as much as I hate Let It Go for personal reasons, it's a great song, but for personal reasons, I hate it so much. I think it's a better song than Into the Unknown. And so is Show Yourself. I think Show Yourself is a much better song than Into the Unknown.
Show Yourself, which almost didn't make it into the picture of the two films, that is the song. It is phenomenal. And
Yeah.
if Disney's CG films has a Wreck-It moment, that's it. And I won't spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen the film, but the last act of Frozen 2 is absolutely brilliant storytelling, and that song is a part of it.
And also, Anna does not get her own song in the second Frozen, except for, again, not spoiler free, that one part, but I don't count that because I don't really think it counts as her own song. But in the first one, she gets First Time in Forever.
Mm-hmm.
So you want me to disagree with you on something, Gary? This is it.
Yeah, we'll take this one offline and we'll enjoy the conversation, no doubt. But for the sake of Ben's sanity, we'll take it. Right, that deer in the headlights look. No.
Well, I'm going to stop you there so we can get back on track with Toy Story. Just again, we love tangents on this show. So I talked about how Toy Story was important. Our memories or lack thereof of the first time we saw it. But what are just your favorite memories of Toy Story, and not just the first one, but of the entire saga of Woody and Buzz?
Can it also be Andy?
Yeah, it can be any of them.
Andy and I are the same age. So in the third Toy Story, when Andy goes off to college, I think I was about my second year of college, so we're not exactly the same age. But the scene at the very, see, I'm getting choked up already. The scene at the very end when he says goodbye to Woody. I'm so embarrassed, I'm crying already. That scene, I cried for 4 hours because I had childhood toys like that growing up, and I had to leave them. I mean, I grew out of them before going to college, so it's not like I had them my whole life and would play with them all the time. But those decisions are really hard, and we watched Andy grew up with Woody, excuse me. And that goodbye scene is probably, see, I'm crying again. It's so hard. Excuse me. And I was Andy, and I literally am Andy. We have the same name. and just that whole thing of, you know, letting go of your past to move into the future is really meant a lot to me. And I don't want to talk about the fourth one so much, but the third, the ending for the third one is probably the one I cry the most in a Pixar movie.
Let that just settle for a moment. The reality of the series of the films is that they tell a personal story that is so in touch with the viewer, whether it's on purpose or not. We find a way to identify with these characters and what they're going through. That was 1999's Toy Story 2 for me, but for a reason that some may not be able to identify. The film came out 6 years before the storm, but I've seen the film several times since. And the first time I watched it after 2005 and what we went through losing our home in New Orleans, it had a whole new poignancy to it because Toy Story 2 is about letting go. Toy Story 2 is about loss. It's about growing up, not necessarily the way you had designed your life to be, but nonetheless being thrust into the adult world. And when Jesse is left behind, it's representative of a part of your life that we all have to go through, which is either losing a loved one, losing everything you own, some other tragedy that will befall you. It befalls everyone. These stories have such a tie to our human condition, to what we experience in terms of our joys and our sorrows, that when a character on the screen, which is just a bunch of pixels animated by human beings, evokes such powerful feelings, it's because it puts us in touch with ourselves, our truest self. And that picture told me my truth in a way that I had not personally experienced what I had gone through in a cathartic way. It was the first time I was able to see a manifestation of all the heartbreak that for 6 years I had endured. And here, it still has a happy ending. You can resolve the loss and come out the other side and be happy again, even though in that moment, it may seem like it'll never happen. You'll never, ever find your smile again. You will. And these pictures elevate us. We may have to go through that hardship, that journey. It can be triggering. But it's what makes these pictures so real. And the irony, of course, is they're pixels of light. And yet, they're incredibly real.
Gary, you should have gone last. Your words of wisdom always ring true. I remember sitting in the theater in 2010 with Toy Story 3, and I really believed that the incinerator was going to be it. Um, like you mentioned before, Disney films, they can get dark. Just 2 years before, we were presented with Wall-E, which told the story of what happens when we don't take care of our trash. And you know, all the bad stuff happens before that. And I really thought, is this the one where Disney, or in this case Pixar, is going to give us that tragic ending? Is it just going to cut to black? And I was sitting in there. I couldn't cry when Andy let him go, because I had already been crying, because I thought it was the end, and I got to breathe a huge sigh of relief when it just kept going. Um, I'll remember Toy Story 3 much more than the other films in the series for that reason. It was the first, it really made me believe that there could be a bad ending and still be amazing. Now that we've gone there, um, last year, Toy Story 4 dropped, and it may not be the follow up to 3 that we wanted, because I think for a lot of us, 3 should have been the way it ended, anyways. But it's it's Disney. They love to keep things going as long as people want to see it. Do you think that there is a future for Toy Story following 4 without Woody and Buzz, or without at least without Woody and Bo Peep?
Yep.
I
I
have
think.
some. No, please.
Sorry. I think Buzz is going to be in charge, and I think it's going to be Jesse, because Jesse and Woody are from the same set anyway, and Jessie has already proven herself to be a very independent woman. And I mean, they're already doing the Toy Story shorts already too. Um, and who knows, maybe we'll follow Woody. I don't know. I do like the carnival characters a lot better than the Key and Peele, Bunny and Duck were probably the best part of that movie. But I do think that there will be more. We'll see more from Buzz and the gang. I don't know if we'll see more from Woody and the gang. It depends on what Tom Hanks wants to do. But I do think there will be a future with Buzz and Jesse, at least, since they already had that connection in earlier films as well.
When you have great characters, you've got the means with which to tell great stories. So just because it's got the brand Toy Story on it doesn't mean that you're limited. This is animation. You can do anything you want. And to take known characters is simply the anchor point. It's something recognizable for the audience to latch onto. It's what creates the gateway for folks to walk through. But as long as you've got creative minds that are at Pixar and Disney, you can create new characters, new stories, new situations, and all new art to go along with that to create adventures that people can identify with. They're not all going to be as poignant as the end of Toy Story 3, and I'm right there with the two of you on that. But Toy Story 4, from my view, was far from a bad picture. It was a very good film. And the best of elements of that picture didn't have anything to do specifically with Woody and Buzz. That relationship, the vast majority of it had been told in the first 3 films. This became about Bo Peep. It became about this doll that wanted love so badly that was willing to compromise all of her moral compass in order to get that love from a child. You can create Duke Kaboom. Best Keanu Reeves movie ever. Duke Kaboom. Anyway, I digress. As long as you have the ability to write for new characters, what a world to play in. It's endless. The possibilities are completely endless. So yes, open up the world and create something new.
I think it'd be interesting to have like a son of Woody, but like from the same collection, but like Woody Jr. and have it be played by Colin Hanks.
Escape from
that
Planet of the Toys.
Yeah. I like your point a lot, Gary, about introducing new characters and opening up that world. And I trust Pixar to do it more than other studios have handled similar lofty goals.
It's not
I
unprecedented. It can be done.
Yeah.
Andrea and I are both fans of Doctor Who, which has been running since 1963. You have the right vehicle, pardon the pun, the right vehicle, you have unlimited stories that you can tell. And that's what Toy Story and animation in general has the ability to do, because you're creating the world from here, not what you go out and shoot, not the limitations that are within a studio. Only your imagination is your limitation. And few would say that Pixar and Disney represents a lack of imagination.
Well, speaking of moving forward, the last question I have for the two of you, is simply what creative directions do you want to see Disney take moving forward? And I'm totally cool with Pixar being in this. I would rather we leave out conversations about Lucasfilm and Marvel because they kind of operate under their own kind of direction, I would say.
Andrea?
I don't have anything. I already gave my idea. I'd love to see them add Anastasia to the Disney parks because she's a Disney princess now, and I love Anastasia. But that's all I have. I want them. Oh, sorry, Gary. I want another musical also. Moana, I think, was the last one they did, but I really like. I mean, I'm biased about the musicals. I like the musicals, but I'd love another musical. I'd love it to be another Alan Menken one because his villain songs are kick-ass. Or another Lin-Manuel Miranda one. I'm fine with that too. But let's see. I would like to not cry in the next Pixar movie, but that's going to be impossible. And I would like their next adapted live-action movie to be better than Artemis Fowl, and I think that is what I'm going to end on.
It didn't make my formal list, but it's certainly up there, even with the number of pictures that Disney has made in the last 97 years. I'm going back to 1923 when Walt landed in Hollywood. Films like The Princess and the Frog, 2D animation, musical, great story, great characters, modern princess, current ideology, something that would actually play to both the adults and the kids, which historically most Disney films on some level accomplish that. But the art form is not dead. There are lots of student films that are currently produced, Oscar-winning shorts that are produced in 2D. Cell animation is not dead by any stretch. But we need to get over our CG bias that it's the art that people want to see. Well, yes, but how the art is produced isn't really the key. It's still art, whether it's drawn on cells or whether you're using pixels of light on a screen. It's still a way to tell a story. And I think it would be a damn shame if we were to, on a commercial level, completely lose 2D animation. And The Princess and the Frog is a very good film, no matter how it was animated. Why can't that be done today? You have Lilo and Stitch, which was successful commercially. The Princess and the Frog was commercially successful. You can still do that and produce art and tell a good story in cell animation. It can be done. That's the direction I want to see Disney go, is embrace their roots as well as the technological advances of the future.
I want them to stop doing their live action remakes. I think if they're going to go in this direction continuously, which I feel like they are, I think they should remake the films that didn't do so well. The ones that I think would be really great remade live action, Treasure Planet and Atlantis. Mm-hmm. I think both of those films, Atlantis more so because there's a lot more characters and you can have a little bit more creative freedom with that one. But both of those films did poorly at the box office. As Gary and I had said earlier, it was released during the Dark Ages. Everybody was comparing them to the musicals, but I think if they redid those films live action, if they were to continue live action, I feel like the live action version of those films would be a major success. You could cast probably Tom Holland. And he'll do his American accent again. But I just think Atlantis probably would be a really, really great live action film because you could do it in the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea style, with the underwater shots and all that ancient new technology, for lack of a better word, because it takes place in 1910s, but the technology looked really, modern. So instead of remaking their movies that were already huge successes as animated films, I feel like if they went the direction of doing ones that didn't do so well as animated films, maybe doing redoing it because those movies should have been live action to begin with, in my opinion. I think they work far better as a live action movie. They were great though. I mean, we all know they were great. I think maybe they'll have a little bit more success. So I say stick with the 2D animation, like Gary said, and I feel like if they're going to continue with live action remakes, I think they should do basically the action cartoons that weren't musicals that didn't do too well. Just try their hand at that.
You saw my groan, and the groan is because it's such a mixed bag.
Yeah, I agree.
Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. Why do those live action, why do those remakes exist? But Pete's Dragon was great. Jungle Book was fantastic. Both of those pictures were remade, were popular, they're based on animated films, and yet they're better, arguably, than the originals. So I have really mixed feelings about this, but like you, Andrea, if they're going to remake films, focus on the ones that didn't do so well. The original Rescuers is a very dark film. In my view, that picture could stand to be re-released in a live action format, but have CG mice and CG albatross supporting the live action. I think it's got a lot of opportunity. They need to lighten that film up just a little bit. Pictures like The Black Hole, which was just a huge missed opportunity because they were trying to ride on the coattails of the Star Wars phenomenon. But it's a great story and has a real opportunity to open up a whole new world of a space exploration story, but done in a classic Disney fashion. And there are other films, like you say, that are not as well regarded, especially in the late 60s and 70s, that could stand to be remade and done well, unlike their original release.
That's these points are very much in line with what I would like to see. I have a lot of faith in Pixar and in Disney animation studios, no matter what direction they go, whether it be 2D or 3D CGI. But their live action films for the past couple years, I really do think they need to start taking more risks. And I understand why they're not. The last film that felt a live action film to me that I can recall that was sort of perceived as a risk right before it was released and then was actually massively successful is Pirates of the Caribbean. Because at the time, everyone thought, who's going to want to go see a movie about an amusement park ride? And then they spent, of course, the next few years writing and continue to ride on the coattails of Pirates. And their last two big budget, risky live action films were massive flops. And the ones I'm thinking of are John Carter and Tomorrowland. And, they're not the best films, but I do enjoy John Carter. It is a fun film. And it's very obvious that Disney just had zero faith in it. Once they truncated the title and just stopped really advertising it at all. Dad and I saw that in the theater together, and we were both like absolutely thrilled. It was just a blast, a fun space adventure. This is before we knew Star Wars was going to come back. We needed that epic space opera. No one had done one in years. And I would love to see Disney take those kind of risks again. And I know that we're going to get some flops out of it. We're going to get some stuff that not a lot of people want to see. Or we're going to get Tomorrowland, which conceptually sounds amazing and then turns out to be a little bit hard to follow and a little too overwritten. But that's what I want to see. I don't want to see too many more of these live action remakes of their classic animated films. I wouldn't mind seeing some of the ones that were less successful. I would like to see a live action remake of The Black Cauldron, because if history has taught us anything these last 20 years, it's that audiences do really like medieval stuff.
There was a lot of opportunity with that film, but they spent so much money on it. And the story artists at the time, you have to think of the era from which it came. They had one foot in the past and one foot in the future. The 9 old men, not all of them had finished retiring yet. yet they still didn't have all of the fresh blood as supervising animators. So they had this old, what would Walt do ideology going on one half of the animation studio, and all of these fresh ideas bubbling over, but not really being able to be fully implemented on the other side of the studio. And they tried to put the thing together, and it just didn't gel, even after what's his bucket came in, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and put on his editor's hat and said, well, of course we can edit this film. Well, we've never edited a Disney film before. Well, maybe that's why a few of your efforts of late have not done so well, because you can trim these pictures even though they are so thoroughly storyboarded and so forth. And they learned from that experience. So yeah, that's a prime example of a film that should be remade, because it's a very good story. It just wasn't executed very well. So it's a good candidate.
And on that note, I'm going to just move us into closing thoughts. So what are your closing thoughts on tonight's episode?
I had fun. I just really now want to see live action remakes of Atlantis and the Black Cauldron. So that got my hopes up, but that's not going to happen because they still haven't even started filming Little Mermaid, I don't think. And Soul looks very good. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Mulan is finally available for those of us who are not premium subscribers, and I have not seen that yet. I'm looking forward to being disappointed. And
you might be disappointed because it's a good picture.
Maybe. I've heard it isn't, but I'll find out, I guess. And I really want to see The Godfather, thanks to you guys. So Disney's The Godfather, yes.
Oh my goodness.
Oh God.
Well, Ben, all I can say is I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. I'm kind of writing the coattails of what Andrea said. It really boils down to tell the stories, tell them well. If you're going to rehash something that didn't do well, great. Do it right the way it should have been done the first time. Don't cut corners. Don't spend your time focusing on the technology. Focus on the story. What you got right the first time, what needs to be fixed. How can you better enhance the experience for the viewer? But don't just triple, quadruple, quintuple dip into the Disney canon and expect miracles to happen. Cash cow, as Eisner learned with a lot of the direct-to-video releases and the Disney tunes, a lot of those things failed, not because the potential wasn't there. Andrea, you'd have to help me out there. The time travel Cinderella, that
Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time.
Yeah, Twist in Time was actually a good film. No matter how you slice it, it was a good picture. More of that, please. If you're going to make a sequel, tell a really good story.
Rescuers Down Under.
Yeah. Yes.
Rescuers Down
Better
Under
than the
was
first
a
one.
Good film. Yes, it was. Very much so. So that really addresses the elephant in the room of, okay, what are you going to do with all of these properties that you already own, that you can exploit this IP and make a lot of money without having to purchase new things? But I will bang the drum of originality. Get your script writers in a room, find properties that may not necessarily be in the mainstream. They don't have to necessarily be a princess movie, and get your team together and write stories that identify with the human condition, that people can jump into and relate to, but not only personally, but can actually run with the feelings that they're trying to convey. And that's one of the things that's sorely lacking, is that in films in general, is that we miss the heart. And if Disney can go either from their vault or by writing original material and always look through the lens of getting to the heart of the viewer, that's when they're most successful.
Well, there we have it. Frickin' Disney Studios. Like, I gotta say, it's the only studio out there where I think it's incredible. It's the only studio out there, apart from obviously the studios they own like Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, that you can look at and say that is a Disney film. All the other films outside of Disney we've talked about tonight, nobody goes back in 1972, no one went to The Godfather because they were excited because we're going to go see another Paramount film, everybody. It's so exciting. So it's really the only studio out there where you can you go to see it because of that brand name. So,
and now that it's actually owned by Disney, can we actually have a Die Hard holiday special produced? I want to eliminate all of the guesswork whether Die Hard is a holiday picture. Make a special. If you can do it with Star Wars, you can do it with Die Hard.
We are going to have an episode later in the month that talks about our favorite alternative holiday films. So that
Lethal Weapon
could be a topic. Lethal Weapon's
number.
Incredible. So yeah. Speaking of which, you are both invited to join either the non-traditional holiday film episode or the traditional holiday film episode because I need to round out that panel. But for now, we're going to go to trivia now. We're gonna finish up this night. So tonight's trivia is of course appropriately Disney themed. It's actually about a sequel, a not so great sequel. So Robin Williams, of course, did not reprise his role of the genie in Return of Jafar. My question is, which Simpsons voice actor stepped in to fill that role? Was it A, Harry Shearer, B, Dan Castellaneta, C, Hank Azaria, or 4, Phil Hartman? And I'm assuming you both know this.
Did you say A, B, C, or 4?
Yes, because I don't know how to use word processors. So
the answer is Sean Connery.
I wish.
Very distinctive. do either of you know? Because
yes.
You know. Okay, so it is
at the same time. One, 2, 3. Dan
Castellaneta. I was waiting for the letter. I was going to say B.
Okay, I trust you both, given your considerable knowledge of these things. So congratulations, Andrea. You are now 2 points. Gary, you're on the board, which I love bringing this up in every episode, and I'm sure it just ticks her the heck off. I've had Dea on the show like 5 or 6 times now, and Dea has not gotten a trivia question correct.
She just needs to get no life like I have.
Hey. Trust me when I say we all have no lives. You two know all the Disney. I was here for the monster stuff. If we needed someone on the panel tonight who could tell us everything we needed to know about pre-1960s film, Dea is the one. So we all have our gifts. So yay, that was the Disney episode. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you very much, Gary and Andrea, for joining me tonight and for educating me a little bit. Like I said, I am not so well versed in Disney as the two of you. So it was a good time. It was a very good time tonight. So yeah. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, the YouTubes. Please send me trivia questions to fisheyelenseesall@gmail.com. For the love of God, I am tired of coming up with them myself every week. And I know people out there have smarter questions than I do, because my questions, all I know are about monsters and Godzillas and Star Warses and Bonzes. That's all. That's the extent of my movie knowledge. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us on December 6th. The holidays are upon us. We're going to be talking about holiday films very soon. So, yay, have fun. On that note, everybody, have a good night.